I was probably 8 or 9 years old when I first encountered the peeing Calvin sticker, but I wouldn't know what it would be called probably for another 15 or so years. To childhood me, it was this awkward, lewd, shocking cartoon on the back of an oversized pickup truck. And for a 9-year-old boy who really wanted to follow the rules, I felt wrong just looking at it. Not because it had peeing, per se. I had seen enough shocking things from the rated R movies that my older brother would sneak home from Blockbuster. But it was the idea that I was seeing something shocking in a public space, in a space that you were not supposed to see lewd or crude or gory or otherwise inappropriate things. I'm 28 years old now, and I know a fair bit more about the sticker than I did then. I know that it wasn't created by Bill Watterson, the original creator of Calvin and Hobbes, and that he actually hates these stickers. And I know that a decent part of my reaction was simply being, a sheltered suburban boy from a small town. But it was seeing this cartoon that was the first time for my tiny little brain having to grapple with this question of what is appropriate and inappropriate for public spaces and public conversation. And it's something that we as a culture are still grappling with, and that's as sort of rooted in our American culture as the First Amendment. The First Amendment itself doesn't guarantee all forms of speech. As you know, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. But even still, these situations are things that the Supreme Court had to deal with after the fact. So we've never had a universal standard of what is and what isn't okay. And this lack of clarity, the sort of nebulous answer to which we have for this question is being stress tested in a way right now like no other, simply because of the internet. I framed today's video in this story of the peeing Calvin sticker, a cartoon meant to shock people, because one, it's something that we are all aware of. I'm sure you have seen the sticker at least once in your life. And two, because although it may seem quaint by today's standards, we are all still living out a freakish nightmare version of the peeing Calvin sticker every day through a little cartoon frog named Pepe. Today we're talking about Feels Good Man, a 2020 documentary directed by Arthur Jones that profiles the rise of Pepe the Frog, a cartoon originally created by an artist, Matt Fury, for a sincere and earnest webcomic, whom unfortunately has been co-opted by radical right-wing extremists and has become the de facto symbol of hate speech in the 21st century. Obviously, this video is going to talk about a lot of very heavy things, so if this is not your bag, if you came from the Napoleon Dynamite video, then feel free to skip this one, and we'll see you in the next video. I promise it'll be a bit more fun. I'm going to be drawing on some information taken from a few key sources, all of which you can find in the description below, and which I have put on the screen here. Part 1. Do your parents know about Pepe the Frog? Talking to people about Pepe the Frog is a lot. Like, a lot. Talking to them about the alt-right, about Gruipers, about 8kun, about Wojak, it can be a bit of word soup to the uninitiated. So much so that if you aren't particularly skilled at organizing and presenting information verbally, if you're trying to explain this phenomenon to somebody, chances are you're going to come across sounding like a bit of a lunatic. So from a use-based perspective, as a tool for helping perhaps those who are older than us, or those of us who are much less online, understand this phenomenon, this documentary is absolutely invaluable. In a slick 93-minute package, my own mother, who is as technically literate as Fred Flintstone, was able to follow the past decade or so of online culture, of memes, of the alt-right, and of the ultimate fruition of digital marketing tactics to the election of one Donald J. Trump. It's this connection, I think, that the documentary excels at most, at drawing a clear line between online meme culture and electoral politics in the 21st century. Because it's at that junction, ultimately, where most of your conversations around this phenomenon are going to break down. Because on the face of it, it sounds crazy. What do you mean a cartoon frog has become a cog in the ever-turning wheel of the rise of fascism? But the thoughtfully presented information, great interviews, and profile of the creator of Pepe Mad Fury in such a way that you arrive at that endpoint with minimal turbulence. The opening credits remind me very much of that classic Alice in Wonderland animation of falling down the rabbit hole, with clips of Colbert, Rachel Maddow, even Eric Trump talking about Pepe the Frog. These are people that your parents are familiar with, and it's through the mix of these quick little bits of interviews with this psychedelic animation of Pepe the Frog that kind of feels like a portal is being opened up between the world of the past, of Walter Cronkite's and meta-narratives and tube TVs, to the world of loose symbolism and digital hyperbole and irony so thick you could cut it with a bread knife. Basically, the world of memes. A quick tangent on memes. Memes? Memes. The documentary presents quotes from Dr. Susan Blackmore, a memetist and professor who also wrote a book called The Meme Machine. And she takes us through the usual song and dance of what is a meme. Have you had this discussion, by the way? Have your parents ever taken you aside and looked at you with the seriousness of asking you what's for dinner and said, what is a meme? So yes, she starts with the 1976 book, The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, who puts forward the idea that all of culture and information acts much like our genes, that we are in a constant competition for attention, and the ideas and information that manage to stick around outcompete the other pieces of information and ultimately live on to become the culture. There's a great quote in there, information copied by imitation from person to person. That's a really good quote, actually. And the real genius of how they present the idea of memes as a concept and memes then to internet memes is through these really gorgeous animations by both the director Arthur Jones and a really talented team of animators whose names I am putting here. They say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and the animations that they put together perfectly capture Dawkins's idea of this Darwinian competition for attention and how ideas mutate and transform, but ultimately you can find traces of their DNA if you look back far enough. Makes this idea kind of just click. It's very intuitive is the word I'm looking for. It's very intuitive to somebody who, even if they had never heard the word meme, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, makes sense. Let's return really quickly to the peeing Calvin sticker that we opened with. This is not the only time we'll return to this, by the way. If you've seen the peeing Calvin sticker, then chances are the peeing Calvin stickers you have seen are different than the peeing Calvin stickers that I have seen. And that's because peeing Calvin is one of the earliest memes, if you will, that you and I ever probably experienced. This was a meme in real life. It's because the original peeing Calvin sticker was meant as inter-sports competitions, as we'll see later, inter-sports rivalries, and now has taken on all kinds of different meanings. The first peeing Calvin I saw was peeing on a cross, but you could have seen peeing Calvin peeing on anything, peeing on whatever people want to pee on. To tie it back to the movie, it's this idea of this Darwinian competition for attention that gets so magnified in places like 4chan and, to an extension, Reddit and other places, because these people who interact there are, one, anonymous, and two, because of the built-in incentive of you want to have your content perform well, and it's only going to perform well if people click on it, and what gets clicks, the most extreme versions of anything, that you see how these places become ground zero for both unfortunate alt-right activity, and also that they're ground zero for a lot of our meme culture in general. A study by researchers at the University College London found that a lot of our memes originate on places like 4chan. But I just want to stop and think about that for a second, that if we can trace our DNA backwards and find common ancestors in real life, and we can indeed trace the DNA of a lot of popular memes back to places like 4chan, where so much hate is the norm, that has kind of some interesting implications for greater meme culture, and also means that a lot of this activity is both popular culture and flying completely under the radar of so many people, which leads me to a subsection part 2. Dog whistling. Did you hear that? No, only dogs did. I bet your dog did. That's because it was a dog whistle. What is a dog whistle? A dog whistle is a message that is sent out explicitly knowing that it is going to be received by a select group of people who recognize it, but it is going to be ignored by the general public because they don't even know what it is you're attempting to say. They find meaningless. It's just noise. Of course, this is going to hit differently after what happened on the 6th, but either way, I've heard elders express that tweets from Trump or others are ultimately trivial in nature, that they don't have much substance outside of the initial freakish phenomenon of them. We find them interesting online. And that's because I think people who are older don't have the ears necessary for hearing the very obvious dog whistles from these people. They don't see when Trump retweets a literal QAnon adrenochrome "the storm is coming" account and giving it so much platform and legitimacy through doing that, because to even understand the garbage that just came out of my mouth, that's like 4 layers of internet culture deep. And to somebody whose only experience is occasionally getting on Facebook, you're not going to understand. And the problem with dog whistling is that sometimes it's really hard to get people who don't have the ear for it to even believe that it is occurring. But the documentary has a really grim, dark sequence, though, that puts it in the most plain, clear language. Like, nobody will ever dispute what's going on. Because you have Matt Brainard, the executive director for Look Ahead America, and the former director of strategy for the Trump campaign, talking about dog whistling. He doesn't say the word dog whistle, but this is what he says. He knew that there was an effort on 4chan to convert normies to vote for Trump. And what he said was the genius of Pepe the Frog was that it gave people who were just barely dipping their toes in a way, he says, quote, a way in. It was that initial seed. He said, having Trump retweet your message, it made you feel like you were part of an insurgency. And he says, if you don't know the intended meaning, then all it is to you is a little odd. But if you do know, then a little antenna goes up. Those are his words. So you have the person directly responsible for the strategy of Donald Trump's campaign, admitting to being fully aware of this freakish cartoon frog nightmare scenario and capitalizing on it, knowing that boomers, old people, it's just going to be hogwash to them. But to real Nazis, to real incels, to real hate-spewing, less than pleasant individuals, it's basically the equivalent of God telling you you're correct. Part 2. A Tale of Two Artists. I think in large part why Feels Good Man succeeds in landing the way that it does is because it likes to center its story around that of the creator, Matt Fury, his partner, Ayana Udison, and his community of friends, family, and fellow artists. The movie drops us quite literally in the beginning of Matt's life, his childhood. There's a little quote that I like that says, "It's been a slow drip of frogs my whole life." And it shows us the inner workings of a really creative, imaginative, like this guy's a true creative. And what the movie does well is it juxtaposes his lived experience and his intended meaning for Pepe with the complete opposite of how people have taken Pepe and used him. The doc clearly shows us how Boys Club was started as an innocent cartoon meant to capture the joys of being a 25-something post-grad who is living with his buds in their first apartment, just drinking beer and eating pizza and doing whatever. There's this really great quote by Tuca and Birdie artist and writer Lisa Hannawalt that says it's the kind of masculinity that you can find yourself dancing to Shania Twain in your underwear, and it's accompanied by a really cute little animation. And it's no coincidence, it is no coincidence that the first instances of Pepe outside of Matt's comics appear in bodybuilding forums. It shows that in the documentary, and I even went and found a few. It is no coincidence, because there's that link between alt-righty authoritarianism and toxic masculinity. And the two are forever linked and nicely juxtaposed with Matt Fury, who's by all accounts is this really nice, soft, generous, he just comes across as a really decent guy that doesn't want beef with anybody to the extent that he was really chill about all of these people using his cartoon in the beginning. And it's now that I'd like to return to the Peeing Calvin sticker and the story of Calvin and Hobbes creator Bill Watterson. So the Peeing Calvin sticker, by at least the source that I found, go back as far as 1995 at the University of Florida. And it was originally designed as meant to pee on the rival school logo. And from there, it grew into competing auto brand rivalries, and from there adapted into whatever it is that people wanted to pee on. But whatever its use, it was basically meant as a shock tactic to show that your in-group was superior to whatever the X-out group was. And when I say lewd, I mean people at the time really thought it was lewd. In 1996, a woman in St. Paul, Minnesota was arrested for having the image on a sweatshirt. So the creator of Calvin and Hobbes, Bill Watterson, who was famously so ideologically pure,
it's pure ideology,
in his approach to his creation, that he actually stepped down after a 10-year run because of the pressure to commercialize the strip. He did not take kindly to these unlicensed images. So much so that after a while, he even contemplated taking legal action to get people to stop. But this was at a time when having access to print stickers and such was so widespread that really there was no putting that genie back in the bottle once this meme had spread to enough people. The parallels between Bill Watterson and his attempts to reclaim the Calvin sticker from these people, and ultimately his unsuccessful attempts at doing so, and Matt Fury and his attempts at wrangling control of Pepe back from 4chan and such, are very clear. However, what the movie does well is it gives us an alternative to that more sad story of Bill Watterson, who, by all accounts, still gets upset every time he sees the sticker with Matt Fury, who did take some action. Sure, he didn't get through to the Anti-Defamation League, and Pepe the Frog still remains an actual hate symbol on their website, but it does successfully take us through him suing the pants off of Alex Jones, and that is important. It's important that that was added at the end, because it shows us that there are steps you can take. There are things you can do to kick these bullies in the teeth. And it's never too late to kick these bullies in the teeth. But sometimes it is too late to stop these bullies from doing some really terrible things. Part 3. Gruipers and the Endgame of 4chan. Well, I basically threw out the original intro to this section in lieu of what happened on the 6th, yesterday, from when I'm filming, but we're just gonna roll with it. The documentary uses a case study of a typical incel loser who, I'm quite frankly shocked, had the shamelessness to allow himself to be filmed on camera with his whole ass face. But he sort of proudly walks us through his narrative of this of 4chan over the past 10 years, which, according to his construction, is one of a community rallying against the consumerism of the aughts, of this rampant positivity culture, and a story of a community fighting back against oppressors. According to him, it's Pepe who is, from their perception, exclusively the domain of these people online, being used by Katy Perry, Nicki Minaj, and some other influencers online. That was this really trigger point in their mind. It was time to take digital online culture that in their mind belonged to them and make it radioactive to the outside world by any means necessary, and that includes swastikas and hate symbols and violent imagery and whatever it took to make Pepe toxic to normies. Now, here's the problem with that narrative, is that we don't know for a fact whether it was the chicken or the egg, as far as if you put up enough swastikas, ironically, a bunch of Nazis are going to gather, or were you all just a bunch of Nazis to begin with, but the end result is the same, that all of this hate stuck around. And in an environment where you have this Darwinian urge to constantly one-up each other, and your starting point is typical Nazi incel loser shit, then where do you go from there? According to the Institute for Research and Education on Human Rights, white nationalists have gotten really good at digital marketing tactics. This article, which I've linked below, profiles the case study of the Gruiper movement, which, if you're seeing on screen, looks a lot like Pepe the Frog, because it is. It is just another permutation of this original comic. Now, what is the Gruiper movement? Well, you got a really good taste of what the Gruiper movement is on the 6th, but I'll put it in some clearer language. The goal of self-professed Gruipers are extreme right-wing politics that would even make the Tea Party blush. They are, by their own definition, paleo-conservatives, although they are working on that branding at the moment. Paleo-conservatives are basically white nationalists. They believe in borders and ethno-state, the removal of all non-white people from America, the works. And the goal of Gruiperism is to push America further right than it already is, by the mainstreamification of hate, by taking hate and dressing it up in a suit and a tie and going out in the real world and normalizing all of this stuff. Because if you can do it in public enough times and get away with it, then what you're basically telling to all of the centrists and all of the boomers and all of the old people is that ultimately you are harmless in nature. The tactics Gruiper use are basically 4chan come to life. Nick Fuentes, the leader of the Gruiper movement, seen here in Nancy Pelosi's office in the Capitol building yesterday, himself has urged his followers to go out to already right-wing events and cause quote-unquote Gruiper mayhem, which is to say, dress up in a suit and a tie and look like your average plain citizen, but push these really hateful messages in these spaces. We are already seeing the Gruiper movement succeed in that regard, that there's so many on Fox News and really in the media talking about the events yesterday already like these people were non-violent entering the Capitol building. They didn't break anything, they didn't cause any damage, and it's again this further normalization of radical behavior. The earliest known use of the term Gruiper, of course, originated on 4chan by a user named Big Dog Gruiper, and he posted on February 28th, 2015, the image of what you see of the original Gruiper image. Now, what was his motivation? Why did he pick the name Gruiper? All of that stuff gets lost to time. All of those genes get lost, but what remains is the smug frog image and a community of hateful people. Nick Fuentes and others are at their core great marketers. They speak the language of advertising and digital marketing all the time if you're perennially online and follow this crap like I do. There's a quote by Nick Fuentes stating how he wants to change the word paleoconservative because it's too long and he wants something a bit more, with a bit more zing to it. These people understand branding and how to push culture. Another right-wing extreme view pusher, Pim Tool, said recently that he subscribes to the idea that politics is downstream from culture and he's going to start reaching out to kids more because he wants to start reaching the next generation of viewers. These people are wealthy, they're educated, and they understand that they can take the average suburban reactionary bro and turn him into a right-wing extremist. Conclusion. Digital literacy is so important. And after January 6th, after seeing Pepe's literally at the Capitol building, this documentary, feels very important too. I recommend that you watch it with your parents, watch it with your friends who don't believe you when you talk about this stuff, watch it in the shower, watch it when you're brushing your teeth, when you're sorting your Pokemon cards. You know, they should play it in schools and in old people homes and comic book shops. The story of Matt Fury, his partner, his family, his friends, and his very compelling cartoon frog is something that we should all understand, because we're going to have to navigate this next chapter of our lives, of this digital frontier. And we better hope to God we are equipped to understand just what the hell is going on. Because I look at the images on TV and on Twitter, and it's the most human question there is to ask. What the hell is going on? What the hell is going on? Anyways, thanks everybody if you've made it this far. I promise next time we're going to do something a bit more light. Go ahead and watch the Napoleon Dynamite video if you haven't seen that yet. And take care, stay safe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.